typically our prize. Yep.
Yep.
All right,
Here we go.
4:04. I'm gonna quickly introduce us here, Deb, to the 15 people that have joined us here. So looking to see any familiar names, and I certainly know some people, and some people I saw in the earlier session I did with Lori and Mimi. So welcome everyone. If you weren't on the early one, I'm Dean Gemmell. I'm the Director of Curling Development at USA Curling. As I said earlier this morning, I started the job in late May. I'm thrilled to be working in curling and in this role, working with clubs and emerging clubs and people who are trying to grow the game to expand and participation and give our game the rightful place it deserves, in my mind. I think it's the greatest sport in the world, and I want more people to know about it. And I'm joined here by my teammate at the Plainfield Curling Club, and really the force behind Icebreakers. I've started this with Deb, I guess, a little over a year ago, but anybody who's listened to Deb, and either, she was on podcasts and we did this a year ago. She speaks about this stuff, this topic, and what we're trying to do here with really well, and in a way that makes everybody feel comfortable, I think, too, Deb. I'm going to say that.
Okay. No pressure.
Yeah, no pressure now to really pull it off. With that, though, I'm going to tell everybody that the chat is available. The questions are available. Feel free to lob things in there. Feel free to, I guess you can ask to be unmuted, and I will make an effort to not tax my technical skills too much and make that happen. I'm going to start by sharing my screen. We do want this to be, it is an update of our presentation from last year, sort of where we're at, what we're finding out, what we still need to accomplish, some of the challenges we've had, and some dates coming up that if you are interested in the program, you're going to want to know about. So let me share my screen here. And then I'm going to flip this to the presentation mode. All right. Is that sharing now, Deb?
Looks good.
Okay. So let me get that on. So yeah, so Icebreakers, Deb wrote this tagline. I love it. Share the sport, elevate the game. We'll talk a little bit about where we're at right now and sort of where we hope to get to, where we plan to go eventually. And I'm going to start well, I'd like to start here anyways. So we already know, I did the introduction, so you know who we are. One thing we wanted to do was revisit the original mission and intent of Icebreakers. One thing we are trying to avoid a little bit is just mission creep. That doesn't mean that we aren't in favor of, diversity of all types across our sport. But our mission with this particular program is to introduce the sport of curling to populations of color with the intent of expanding BIPOC, which is Black, Indigenous, people of color, representation and retention within the sport. So, not only have people in the sport trying it, but also continuing in the sport. And Deb, do you want to add anything to that slide while we're here?
No, I think that pretty much captures it. It's simple, it's clear, and it's really kind of the bottom line. So yeah,
I think one thing that, one thing we've talked about too, Deb and I, when we've had meetings with clubs is, while we hope that this, that Icebreakers, the program, does include whether it's disadvantaged youth in certain areas or those kind of youth programs that maybe we associate with something like First Tee, which, we want that to be part of Icebreakers, but that's not the sole intent here. We're not hoping to solve every socioeconomic problem with this program. We want to increase the diversity within the sport. And I think a lot of it is just, I always say the sweet spot for curling clubs with recruiting is often 25 to 40-year-olds. I don't think it's any different with this. It can be, of course, younger and older than that, but I think the same recruiting mentality you have at your club with, in general, applies to this as well.
Yeah, on that point, Dean, I would just amplify by saying one of the things we talk about a lot is interrogating our unconscious bias. And in the last year or so in having these conversations, doing the different huddles with different clubs who are interested in trying to animate this mission around icebreakers. One thing that is a theme that seems persistently connected with icebreakers is I guess there's a default to automatically assume that we need to address, socioeconomic challenges around access to the sport. And I always like to just say, I'm not opposed to that in any way, but my example has been to say to people, if I were proposing an outreach program to women or an outreach program to the LGBTQ community, like my brothers and sisters under the rainbow, the first thing people would say to me is probably not, oh, well, what are we going to do to help people afford it? And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying that it's okay to, I guess, disconnect or separate the purpose of what we're trying to do with introducing and opening up the conversation around our sport to populations of color, and not necessarily feel like we have to swoop in and be a savior or fix all problems. If there are structural problems with access to our sport, I would argue that those go across color lines into other areas, and that would be a worthy conversation, but not necessarily the conversation we're having under this umbrella. And sometimes people like to blend those two things together, and it's just a default. It's a systemic default that you talk about population outreach, you think you're talking about disenfranchised people, you're thinking, oh, well, what do we have to do to correct that? And I think this conversation is about representation versus homogeneity, and those two things are not necessarily dependent or consistent with socioeconomic challenges. So it's part of it, it's not the whole conversation. So I just think that's an important thing to consistently reinforce.
Yeah, and quite simply, Deb, we want more curlers that are like you, to be honest. I mean, we always joke that Deb's the most popular Black curler in the country and she needs more competition. So,
Yeah.
I should say Deb and her wife Charlotte joined my home club in 2010. People haven't heard this before, and have been I've never seen two people get curling quicker and engage in it, start spieling, etc. So not only is Deb great on this part of the program, she's also a giant curling nerd. So if you want to, if she will be thrilled to meet any curlers of any note, especially, right, Deb?
Oh my God, give to me the curlers. Yes.
Yeah.
I would just say too, I mean, I don't know how I became the accidental ambassador. I feel like I'm sort of a poster child for this. It's a total accident, guys. Like I always feel compelled at some point in one of these conversations to say that I am not an expert on all things Black. I'm an expert on my Black experience, and I'm hoping to help people, tap into the courage of their convictions to have what may be sometimes uncomfortable conversations. But my experience in the sport and all sports that I've played has been that the only way to improve that is to show up, have the conversations, and do so from the spirit of goodwill and a place of I guess generosity and compassion. So that's all I'm here to represent. There's not like some secret meeting and I get hauled out to be like this poster child for Black curling or whatever. But just to be clear, I don't speak for everyone. And if there are any other curlers of color out there in within the sound of my voice, if you'd like to step into this conversation, please do. I'd love to have more voices in the discussion. But if it's just me to be the ambassador as a curling nerd, as a fangirl, I'm happy to fill the role until you guys are sick of hearing my voice. So,
and if you do want to connect, if you're one of those curlers, you can send Deb an email, or you can send me an email and I'll connect with Deb. So it's dean.gemmell, Gemmell, at usacurling.org. We want to talk a little bit about what we've done so far. And I'll be honest, I said this is hard work because it isn't easy. And I've said the whole time that we're sort of taking off in the plane and then building it as we're in the air a bit. I think initially we thought we would select 5 or 6 pilot clubs and really have, focus on them. And I think in some ways it's almost becoming self-selecting. So the clubs that have the bandwidth and or have people are engaged in it, those are sort of becoming the clubs we're working most closely with. Doesn't mean that other clubs, and I think Deb would agree with this, we want clubs to feel like they can participate in it, whether they've been with us early or if it's mid-season and suddenly, I know there are clubs that have COVID restrictions at the start of the season, so maybe they can't really do this now. But certainly we're hoping to keep adding committed clubs. We do want clubs where there's a committed group and a group that's ready to tackle this challenge, including within your own club, quite frankly, and we'll talk about that a bit. Building connections and allies, those a lot of, and I'll let Deb expand here a bit, but we've had good conversations, for instance, with the people at Mayfield and their committee, at Broomstones, where they're actually doing going to launch a good program with schools there, and the folks in Portland. And we're always, we've had these 1 hour sessions where we talk to people about it. But one of the things that we keep coming back to is allyship. And Deb, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I guess I always looked at this as we've been talking about it now for about a year. Now that curling is actually seeming real again and it's starting to happen, I think now is kind of where we can look at it through the lens of how do we animate this vision or animate the mission that we've been sort of banding about and forming as we've kind of progressed along, stumbling through this. I feel like there's two very important pieces to a program like this. One is the outreach, right? Making the intentional ask or introduction of our sport to populations of color specifically who don't typically get invited to the dance or don't really know that they're welcome, just kind of saying, hey, we see you, you're welcome here. The other piece of it, I think, that has sort of evolved and emerged as maybe presenting a bigger challenge in some ways in terms of people's comfortability with discussing this, is building the conscious culture within our clubs and within our sport that once people try it and once they've been invited through our doors, they feel welcome, they feel accepted, and they feel like it would be an easy place to continue to show up there. I think that initially the focus was very external. It's just like, let's introduce our sport to other communities. Now it's also about making sure that our community has the acumen and has like the ability to have the right conversations at the right time with the right tone. So it's a twofold process, in my opinion. So Icebreakers is more than just sharing the sport. It's also about building conscious culture within our curling community so that when we share it, the people that we invite in feel welcome and feel accepted, and we learn how to have those interactions. And I think that's just repetition and practice, and all of us having the courage of our convictions to show up in a spirit of goodwill and say what needs to be said and continue to grow together.
And Deb, you made I thought a good point in one of our sessions with one of the clubs, in that it's like, look, I believe in curlers, and I think that curling can be a force for good. So I don't want people to think that we think there's huge stumbling blocks. But you brought up a good point where you said, even if you walked into our little club in New Jersey and suddenly there were 20 people of color on the ice, you might be you'd be not bothered, you'd be happy, but a little surprised, right? I mean,
yeah, there'd be some culture shock. The word is culture shock. I mean, yeah. I've been in the sport for 10 years, and I'll be honest with you, if I ever saw that, I'd be like, what is happening? So, and it wouldn't be like a negative for me, but I could understand that it may be off-putting or may give people pause if they are used to being in a mostly homogenous space and suddenly it's not so homogenous. And we're not going to do ourselves any favors by pretending like that's just not going to happen. Like I think we have to have courageous conversations from a place of understanding, and I think the work that we're doing is valuable, but we don't do ourselves any favors by pretending like I would be like, oh yeah, I wouldn't think of anything of it. Of course I'd be like, what's happening? And then I would immediately move towards that group of people, like introduce myself, because I have a level of comfort with that. But I could understand that that may throw some people off. And I think those are the types of real conversations that we need to have to prepare our clubs if we decide to do this, on what to expect, when to expect it, and to be, I think, understanding on both sides of the equation that we're moving people through a space of change, and change is uncomfortable. The other thing I say, Dean, is that a lot of our conversations this last year have been people asking me questions that I feel like they're trying to find out how I can help them be more comfortable having this conversation. And I hate to say this, but I really feel like discomfort is going to be part of this process. And that's how we know we're growing. I think comfort is not going to happen until we get some experience and some exposure. It's sort of like muscle memory. I know my first 3 slides, maybe my first 20 slides are going to hurt because I don't have the muscle memory there. I expect that and I've accepted. I feel like this program is no different. If you don't have the muscle memory and you're not conditioned for this particular conversation, it may be uncomfortable. You might hurt a little bit, you know, it might be something you have to stretch and warm up for. But that's what we're trying to do, is create a space where we can be honest about that and coach each other through the process, because we feel like the outcome is worth it. Like being able to play well is worth what we go through to get to that place. That's how I view this.
Yeah, and it's it's been a learning process for me with working on this too, because I consider myself pretty comfortable with these things. But yeah, you do get into, it does, you're right, it's a muscle that needs to be worked a little bit for everybody. And gain more confidence having these kinds of discussions. Participation and activity to date, I just touched quickly on the fact that we are, we have these calls. Anybody on this call, and I know I see a few names that we're hoping to schedule calls. We're doing some scheduling back and forth, but the 1 hour calls we've had between Deb and I and the clubs, one of the things we've talked a lot about is how to do the outreach. And even that, I think I asked you early on, Deb, like how do we do the outreach? And one thing, Deb sort of simplified. It's like, yeah, just say, hey, we don't have many people of color who curl, and we'd love to have you out. And we have ideas on organizations you can reach out to. There's a Teams channel or a team, whatever you call it, in Teams that if you want to be part of, send me an email, and there's ideas there for who you can connect with. For instance, we spoke to Mayfield, and we found out that there's in the town they're in now, there's a Black professional fraternity that would be a great contact. And one of the other things I think that came out of it in our conversations was that, it doesn't have to look the same at every club. For instance, Broomstones is a club that, if you know it at all, they don't have much capacity for new members, but what they can do is introduce the club or introduce the sport to audiences that may not participate. And then hopefully those people will find their way to other places, or at least become converted to curling enthusiasts, right? If they're not able to start curling right away. So every club can look at it a little different. And some clubs, it doesn't have to be like what we've talked about too, is a learn to curl does not have to be, you don't have to do, we're going to do a learn to curl specifically for Black people this weekend, right? You can reach out to the Black community and say, or the BIPOC community, and say, hey, we have a learn to curl this weekend and we have 8 open spots. We'd love to see people from your organization join us. So it doesn't have to be, sort of all in one, I guess, right, Deb?
Yeah, I think that summarizes it pretty well, is that I don't feel like anybody needs to do anything special in terms of how the learn to curl functions or operates. I think that was one of those maybe things that was sort of emerging. There's nothing you need to do different operationally in how you execute these programs. I think it's really just about who you invite to the party. What you serve and how you serve it doesn't need to change. So clubs that already have a system of outreach, recruitment, learn to curls, curling experiences, group outings. I'm basing this exclusively on my limited experience, but the way that we do outreach at Plainfield, for example, is an engine that's already churning. The only thing I would inject into that engine is making sure we point the focus of those invitations intentionally at other communities that traditionally, maybe it's a blind spot. Nobody thought, like, hey, maybe we should deliberately reach out to the Hispanic American, coalition, or I don't know, the Black Girls Run, group in our neighborhood, because we're in a neighborhood where our club lives that is very diverse. And the fact that we're not as representative of that diversity as we could be seems to me like a missed opportunity. And that's really how simple it should be, is that if you look around and you feel like you're underrepresented based on where your club is, then you should look for ways to have those conversations and introduce those communities. And whatever happens after that isn't really up to us. It's just making sure that we include the people. I think inclusion is the act. Diversity is the fact, right? It's out there. Whether we decide to participate or not and invite that into our space is really where the action step becomes. And that's why I always say, then it comes back to, once those people are there, are you setting the stage and setting a tone within your club and organization where they'd be likely to stick around because they feel welcome, and not singled out, or whatever the case is, So, and I think that's where this program sort of is the sweet spot. It's the introduction, and it sets the tone for having broader conversations about our sport with more people, specifically people of color.
I'll touch the last point here, these coaching sessions. So we spent a lot of time wanting to introduce unconscious bias training or implicit bias training as part of this program. And honestly, I was sort of shocked and a little disappointed to find out how difficult it was to find that sort of training that suited our sport. That, you know, we're talking about, you know, it's not like if you work at AT&T and we can demand you take this training because it's your job. We want to engage and keep volunteers enthusiastic. So we want it to be the kind of training that's dynamic and interesting to do. And then I guess the other thing, though, as we went along, we realized that it wasn't so much unconscious bias training that we needed, even though that's part of it, but it's a lot of coaching about how to manage this process, whether it's the outreach or the own reaction from, you know, internally at your own club or facility. So Deb has taken that on herself and put it together. And we have dates coming up that we'll get to as we go through here, but that's been a big part of it. And I think if you want your club to be in this, you're going to want to be part of these sessions. In fact, you really need to be. So we'll give you the dates on those as we go through. But yeah, I was surprised by how difficult that was. I know, for instance, Curling Canada has unconscious bias training up on their website, but it's essentially, you know, something they took from Microsoft. So it's for the tech world, and we were hoping to get something specific to curling. So Deb's taken that on herself. So we're going to have our own program that I think is going to be great. Even the USOPC, their program on this is still in its infancy. So we're trailblazing here, Deb. So,
oh boy.
Just quickly, some of the clubs that have icebreakers efforts underway to varying degrees, and this is only a small. These are some of the clubs that have made the most intentional efforts, like whether it's talking with us about it or having, you know, most, like Mayfield, we've had a lot of discussions where they moved into a new suburban area. They have a committee dedicated to this now, and I think we had really good conversations about how they could move this forward. But there's other clubs as well, and I want to encourage anybody on this call, if your club isn't so far engaged, we'd love to talk to you about being engaged with it. I think, you know, initially Deb and I were so intent on wanting to make it programmatic and not just a USA Curling trying to latch onto this diversity effort and say we're great. We wanted to do things that really produce results, and we do, but we still do, of course. But I think one of the things we realize, there's some soft sides to this too, whether it's banners and clubs to help make sure that we're providing. We have in ice decals, although a little late because most clubs have their ice in, but we have ones. We have those things to make people feel more comfortable when they come in, and we're hopeful to add more of that stuff. We don't want to think this is just a marketing effort, but we've realized some of those things will help just to create some momentum. So we all will be offering more things to clubs that are thoroughly engaged in the program. So these are the sessions that we have coming up: Sunday, October 17th and Thursday, October 28th. We'll have times shortly, but those two dates. And Deb, if you can you give people a little idea of what they might expect when they attend one of those sessions?
Sure. So I guess for those who've never taken an unconscious bias training, like at their employer or within an organization, it's fundamentally based on the same structures and the same pillars of what we need to talk about when it comes to building acumen around unconscious bias. So the first few minutes will just be sort of establishing or snapping the chalk line around terms and terminology like halo bias or, you know, similarity bias, or different things that creep into how we make decisions, how we choose to handle and be in community, and where our comfort levels are and how we interface, and what sort of informs those discussions. Some of it is race related, some of it might be gender based, some of it might be economics, but it's basically the assumptions we bring to every interaction. And the thing I'd like to really make clear to everyone is that when it comes to unconscious bias, it informs not just how we deal with people of different races, but also of different genders, of different cultures. We make a lot of assumptions, and all of us do it. So it's not just like, oh, if it's people of color moving into an all-white homogenous space, that this is the one-way street. It's everywhere, I think, and that's the key, is that we all have those and we all bring those to the table. So first and foremost is to become aware of it, maybe to interrogate it a little bit and be honest with ourselves, that this is what we're doing. Because if you don't know what you're doing, you can't change it. And then we move from knowing better into how do we do better? How do we take those acknowledgments and consciously interrogate them and make sure that we rework our interaction. So there'll be some practical and applied things. And this is less of a training and more of a coaching around real world scenarios that we would find like in a curling community. It's not so much a corporate based training, because if you want a corporate based training, you can take one. And also that's an employer saying, this is what we need you to do. These are the rules of the road, and there are penalties for not behaving accordingly. This is more of an opt-in. I want to know better so that I can do better, so that I can be part of the solution within the community. Not everybody's going to want to do that, and that's fine. But the people who are there, I feel like we should be able to have a good conversation and a real conversation and actually come away with some practical skills and some things to think about, like from the terminology we use, because words matter, from the assumptions we make, things that we think might be funny that would not be if we thought it through differently. So it's really just a way of saying step one is to look at how we approach situations and what informs our assumptions. And step two, to sort of interrogate that. And step three, how do we actively change it? And if we mess up, how do we just kind of call ourselves out and course correct in real time? What has become clear to me in the time that we've been having these more crucial, I would say, challenging conversations is that most of us have a fear of stepping on the landmine. So we don't engage for fear of engaging improperly. So I started feeling like the need was less about just saying, here's what unconscious bias is. Yeah, that's great. Now, what do I do with that? Like, now that I know that I have all these biases, how do I change my behavior? So these two sessions, and I don't know if they'll be the only two, but these first two sessions will be sort of the template for trying to give us all the skill set that we need to build the muscle memory that we want, so that we have these conversations with a different perspective. And hopefully it'll be fun. I know it sounds weird, but I don't want to do anything that feels like, oh, this is just another one of those uncomfortable things. So we'll have some games. I feel like you can learn by interacting. And I hope that people enjoy and come away just having like learned one new thing or feeling better about some things that they just haven't really talked about or maybe haven't been exposed to. So it won't be your typical conventional corporate training, but it'll have a lot of that in it.
And I will say, anybody who's been around Deb will know it will be fun. And you mentioned being worried about stepping on landmines, and I think that's a great point. Anybody who's at all nervous about it, and I'll admit there are times when I'm nervous, even in these presentations, that I'm worried that I'm going to say the wrong thing, or and I will say, if you're taking this coaching from Deb, she's not going to go. She knows that people step on landmines, and that will only help your comfort levels. But I mean, I totally understand it. I mean, I still think sometimes during these presentations, I don't want to say something wrong, but I think we're better off forging in and occasionally screwing up than not trying, right? So, and Deb will make it fun. It'll be good. We're also going to have mid-season checkups. We're going to have, and we're always open to have calls with the individual clubs who are doing it. And I'm going to say we really in those calls, the one who drives those discussions and really pushes the ideas is Deb. I'm there to sort of help, but you'll get lots of good thinking and good ideas out of those calls. Sorry, I'm trying to get to the next one. When you register for one of the club, when your club says, hey, we want to take one of these coaching sessions, some of the things we're going to ask during the registration, and there'll be a registration form that'll be available from USA Curling, but how will your club animate the mission of Icebreakers this season? What is the plan? And I want to stress here too, we're not asking you to provide detailed essays to be allowed to be included, but we do want to prompt some thought and some conversations. How will your club create a more inclusive, conscious culture within your membership? If you can provide actions, examples you think that would be helpful, that'd be great. And then of course, what more could the USCA and Icebreakers do to help you? Both in your club and in your community. And then this is a big one, and this is one of the things that comes up in our calls, is what's the biggest obstacle to animating this mission at your club and in your community. And so those will be questions that as you register, and I don't want people to think that we're somehow trying to screen people either. We are just trying to make people engage and think before they do this. And we want our clubs to do that, or clubs and facilities that are Icebreakers clubs and facilities, that we want them to be successful. So we're trying to help make that happen.
And hey, Dean, I see there's a question in the chat
Yep.
from Lauren, and she's asking about, do both of these sessions cover the same material, or does the material on the 28th build from what is covered on the 17th? They are the same exact session to the degree that I can do everything the same twice. I feel like, interaction will be different, but they're designed to be the same session, not a continuation of a story. And there is no cost. You just have to opt in. I guess the cost is answering the questions that are on the survey so that we get an idea of who's coming through the door and kind of what you're bringing to the equation. The other question that we were going to also ask, I think, Dean, it was like a late to the party question, was if you've ever had any type of corporate training or formal training around unconscious bias, so I could get an idea of like maybe what type of acumen people are bringing to the discussion. It's not required that you have that. It's not geared for people who pick up from that place, but I just want to make sure that I understand who's in the audience so we can tailor the discussion accordingly.
And I would say if you want to be a champion of this within your club or facility, that you, one of the things we talk about with the groups is try to form a committee. So it's not just you, try to form a group of people. And I would encourage you to make sure all those people register for one of those sessions, the people who are engaged and want to make this, part of an ongoing effort. But yeah, I think that's a great point, Deb. You don't have to attend both, one or the other. I told Deb it's a bit like a stand-up special. We're going to do 2 nights and then we're going to edit it in for permanent on YouTube, and we'll take the best parts of both. So
yeah, that's not intimidating at all, Dean. Thanks.
No, it's fine. No, that makes it less intimidating. As long as you just need the same background and backdrop both times, Deb. So we can just edit it and no one will know.
Okay,
so
sounds good.
There's maybe one other chat question here, if I could get to it. It's just a chat. It says, awesome. Thank you, Deb. So let's keep moving then through this, unless
Okay.
Do you want to cover anything else here and just on those 4 points, Deb?
I don't think so. I just want to, if anyone who I hope everyone in the sound of my voice who's considering coming, please just come with an open mind and understand that this is not the type of conversation where there's going to be a ha-ha or a got ya. It's going to be a learning session where we expect people to come and ask the tough questions so we can really get practiced at having good conversations that actually move us forward. The idea this year, or the spirit I'm working with this year, is it's now time to animate the charter, not just talk about it. We need to learn how to walk the walk if this is ever going to go from being a concept into an actual program that we believe in. And that's why the word animate to me is important. And also, it's how you as an individual plan to animate it. If your club is not setting up an icebreakers program, it's not formal and structured and buttoned up, that's fine. I'd like to know, or it's perfectly acceptable to say, as an individual, as a curler, I plan to animate this mission or this vision in this way. It doesn't have to be big, sweeping, dramatic gestures. It could just be the way that you choose to talk about curling, or who you choose to talk about it with, and what you're going to do in your club to emulate this and model the behaviors that you hope become the standard.
Yeah, and again, I like every club, and every person, there's going to be different approaches to this. Your communities are different, and we're really hoping, as the national with the national oversight of it, or not oversight, I think that's a little heavy-handed, but with our national perspective, things we pick, we can share best practices and things that worked in one facility versus another, because clearly, some clubs might have certain challenges, and we want to make sure we share those and keep those communication lines open. But every time I try to do this, oh my gosh, everybody's watching is like, why is Dean constantly toggling around? So last thing here, one of the things you can do is in the short term, if you and your club want to invest, not financially, but invest in this program psychically, schedule a Zoom meeting with you and with Deb and I and your committee. I think those are pretty helpful. I think you could ask, like, for instance, Rachel Howell at Mayfield and that group. They got a lot of ideas and came out of it, I think, with more enthusiasm to move forward. Doesn't mean we have all the answers for everybody either. And some clubs have specific challenges like ice time or whatever else. Arena clubs have that, but schedule a meeting with us for that communication and attend these coaching sessions that Deb is going to do. I know they're going to be great. I'm excited just to attend them, to be honest, just as a, in some ways, just personally, I think it'll be valuable, but also will help us quite a bit as we try to move this program forward. Since, I'm trying to save Deb's bandwidth, so all boring, administrative, tedious tasks fall to me, and then I turn to Deb for answers, but call or email me directly, dean.gemmell@usacurling.org with questions, or if you want to set up that kind of meeting. And then, the big thing is this is the same for everything we're doing, but, really the bottom line with this program is no different than a lot of programs we want to put forward at USA Curling is to grow the game and expose more people to it. I think we have a great game, and I actually think that curling, I've said this before in other calls, I think curling can be a force for good. I think the organic nature of curling, the way we gather in teams of 4, the way we sit around afterwards, I think all those things can be so healthy, and that's why I'm hopeful a lot of clubs will embrace this program. I mean, at our own club, Deb and I, we know there's a diversity of thought there, and people who would come together in a way that may not typically. Now we'd like to encourage, diversity across the entire spectrum, but one of my, I'll quickly close with this, but one of the reasons I reached out to Deb about this was she started curling with Charlotte in 2010, and I was a club president. And I remember thinking, oh, this is very exciting. We have 2 Black women who are curling. That's unusual. And then not thinking about it much until about 10 years later, and realizing that in that 10 years, we'd added 1 other Black member. And I thought, well, maybe there's something we could be doing differently at my own club and nationally to change that dynamic. And if you look at, I was on the USOPC Athletes Advisory Council, and the sports that are vibrant and growing are the ones that are embracing diversity and bringing more people in under their, the umbrella of their sport. And sport can be a real positive thing for people. And I'm not naive enough to know that there aren't people who may not even not like the program, but just wonder why we need it. Which, and I think the reality is just look at most curling facilities. We could use more diversity within them, and I think it will be helpful for the sport. I know having Deb and Charlotte at our club has been incredibly helpful for our club. It has injected they inject their own spirit in it, and and that's true of a number of other people too. But I want people to know that. So with that, I think we can pause and take questions if there's questions, or open up the chat if people have more thoughts, or if anybody wants to share experiences or challenges or anything else. Or if you're all exhausted. When I meant to stop sharing my screen. No, I can't do that. Steve, help me. I've screwed this up. There we go. Thank you, Steve.
No questions? What?
No questions from the group. I see Sonia's here. Sonia's part of our DE&I efforts. Eric Reithel from Windy City. He says, I'm mostly just looking forward to working with you both. Eric, I know at Windy City, Deb and I were impressed with some of the programs you guys already have, and your whole website. I think for other clubs is a good one to look at, just in terms of how your information is presented. So you're doing a lot of things right there. This is a good one, Deb. You've sort of had this before, from Lauren Visser. The town where our club is located is 85% white. Any suggestions on how to increase BIPOC representation when there aren't a lot of people to contact? And I sort of know where you're going to go with this, Deb, but let me hear it again.
No, I don't know your town, Lauren. I would just say that my gut reaction is representation is only possible when there is diversity to tap into, number one. So if that is the case, that where the people who live there are, majority white, I would ask, are all the people that come into and out of your community also majority white people? Like, do Black people or people of color move through that community? Do they work there? Do they serve that community in any capacity? Do they shop there? Do they eat there? I don't know. I'm just saying, like, I think sometimes we get very fixated on maybe because we don't live in the community that we're not of the community, and vice versa. Like there are a lot of majority Black communities, for example, that would say, oh, we're all Black all the time. But then when you look around and you see people coming through, commuting into work or coming into restaurants, etc., it's not quite as homogenous as we think. In spirit, yes, but in practice, no. So I would say, without knowing your town specifically, see if there are any organizations that are already doing the legwork, that are already set up for, let's say there's 3 Black people in the town. Are those 3 Black people connecting on anything around a common purpose or a common cause? What I feel like we amplify the most, Dean, is that the reason I like sports as a really great like segue or liaison into this conversation is because it already unites people around a common cause, and in some cases with curling, a common passion. So you already have something to talk about. It makes it a lot easier to get to know people when you can already start with, oh my God, I love curling. You too? Great. We can have 1,000 hours of conversation without ever having to get into anything more. And then that
Deb can
allows
definitely
us
have 1,000 hours of conversation.
about just about anything, but specifically curling. And I usually say to people, if you don't want to be bored to death, don't ask me about curling, because I will just it'll be nonstop. But long story short, I think you want to look at what else is happening in your community beyond the people who reside there, and think about the people who serve the community. And also, I am a big fan in any program I've ever worked on or developed in not reinventing the wheel. Draft. Find who's already doing this work. Find places that you can latch onto or connect in with, and allow them to kind of pull you through it when possible. I know it's not a perfect answer because every community is different, but those are just my knee-jerk reactions. If you have specific challenges, Lauren, I would love to kind of talk those through with you, but just at a broad base for everyone, think about everybody that interfaces with your community, and ask yourself, is it really that there aren't any people of color for me to link in with, or is it just that I don't see them because they're the invisible people that kind of maneuver through the community but don't really live there? That's
Eric notes that Lauren is also on the DEI committee at Windy City. So Windy City is sort of, Deb, and I think you know it, but it's in one of the further western suburbs of Chicago. So I think sometimes too, just maybe spreading out your idea of who's close, who's within a reasonable distance of the club might just also just expand your perspective. I mean,
that's a really important point, Dean. I think we talked about this on one of the calls some point this year where we were discussing it with a club. And I said, honestly, think about where the furthest member who comes to play at your club comes from. I don't know if this is across the nation, but I know in our tri-state area, we have people that drive like 90 minutes to get to curling, or 2 hours to get to curling. It's not like everybody lives a stone's throw from the club. So my point is, like, draw the circle around your club and think, well, where's the most distal person coming from? Why wouldn't a person of color do the same thing if they found out that they liked it? So maybe don't limit the scope into what's convenient, but think about where you could introduce people and then allow them to develop the thirst for making the trip to your club, if that's the case. But I mean, even at our club, most of the people that I know that I curl with live a distance from the club. I'm fortunate that I live so close, but we're like an anomaly that we live as close to the club as we do. Most people travel.
In fact, in our club, it's almost the reverse. We need to do a better job of reaching out to the community all around us. Our immediate community, we're not the greatest at reaching out to them, and we need to improve that. So unless I don't see any other chats or questions, and I know, we could run this, I could just keep blabbing on for the full hour, but in lieu of further questions, here we go. Lauren says, I have so many questions. Okay, good. Here's another one. Deb, have you noticed any barriers in the sport of curling itself?
No, actually, not that are specific to like racialized people so much. I think there are cultural constructs within the sport that could be potential landmines, just given where the sport comes from, where it originates. I know that there are some bonspiels and themes that we probably should take a look at. Again, going to the unconscious bias and sort of knowing better, learning better language and expressing ourselves differently. Might want to take a look in some instances on some bonspiels that I've seen in terms of what's an appropriate theme. Structurally, the sport itself, no. However, I have to caveat that with, I'm also a person who grew up playing unconventional sports for Black people. So in my world, like, I was a swimmer, I was a rower, and now I'm a curler. I may not see those barriers the same as somebody else would because I'm kind of used to being in that space. But no, like I would say, for example, if I'm interpreting your question correctly, swimming had more actual barriers in that, I mean, I don't know if you guys have been following, but just this year they had an issue with the Olympics and whether the person could wear the swim cap that was made for black hair. Yeah, those are the types of things that I think you might mean. And in curling, I haven't seen anything that would make it be like, oh, for racialized people, this would be different. So no, it feels like it's, pretty, I think, accessible. I think culturally, there might be some structural things in how we handle curling and the pieces around bond fields and themes, but
I'll add to that real quick, Deb, in that, one thing you shared with me earlier was when Teak, our third Black member of Plainfield Curling Club, joined, she looked on our website and saw a photo of Deb and Charlotte and realized that okay, that made it like a place that was okay. So be cognizant of what you put out there. And that doesn't mean you have to show pictures of Deb and Charlotte, but at least put out a message that's inclusive on your site. I don't want people to think that, oh, now we have to, I don't want Deb or Charlotte to feel like they were somehow put up there just because we wanted to show we have Black members. But be conscious of how you present on the site. I mean, and I'll be honest, I've seen some things even recently that were probably with good intentions, but you can put up a learn to curl ad that maybe feature. And as much as I love vintage curling stuff and everything, you might want to think about, if you show an old photo and it's 4 white guys from 1940, it may not be the best way to encourage a diverse audience to come out and try your sport. And I'm a guy who loves, if I could fill my house with vintage curling photos, I would. But be aware and cognizant when you're putting out, especially messages where you're trying to attract new curlers. Be cognizant about what you're putting out there, I think is important. And again, I believe in curling, and I think we're one of the better sports for accepting people and everything else. It doesn't mean we don't have work to do and we can't improve. Sonia asked here, any chance of sharing a list of club DEI committee contacts so icebreaker clubs can connect with each other and share ideas? She does mention this, and this is a great thing that's happening. Wine Country Curling Club is talking with Colonial Curling Club, opposite coasts, but they're meeting and they talk and share ideas. So yeah, I will make sure that's in our Teams channel, and I will share it by email if I can. So yeah, I'll put that together, Sonia. That's a good idea. I'll have a spreadsheet with contacts and I'll put it where it's helpful to people. Eric has a question. Here's a question that may not be the best wording, but have you experienced or heard of fights for attention from people trying to include marginalized groups? And if so, how to navigate these waters, i.e. someone wondering, why are we reaching to this group when this group is also underrepresented? Is there any risk of leaving someone behind as a club works to increase its diversity? I've had this discussion with you, Deb, so I'll leave it to you to tackle better than I would.
Yeah, I would say, Eric, the short answer is yes, of course there is. I mean, this is about progress, not perfection in my statement. And again, I don't have a PhD in diversity. I always want to make sure people understand. I'm sharing with you kind of how I see it, how I've experienced it, and how I live it. 2 things. Yes, it is possible. I think what we get very consumed with, though, is it goes back to what you were saying, Dean. Like, if you're putting out images that are of one way and not the other, I am a fan of the conjunction, both and, not either or. So I don't feel like just because you're going to focus like specifically on increasing representation of populations of color specifically, that it means you have to necessarily exclude or not focus on others. I would like to think we are capable of doing multiple things at once. I live at the intersection of Blackness, gayness, and femaleness, right? Like, I identify as a woman. So there you have it. I have to multitask every day as I walk through this world. I do think it is possible for people to perceive that, but I also always question, if someone is suggesting that, I would follow up with, what do you suggest instead? It is a lot easier to edit than it is to create. And in terms of going after something and trying to do something in the right spirit, maybe it does need to be improved or tweaked or expanded. So let's do that, right? Let's have that conversation. Let's not make it seem like because you're not doing this, this is a program that isn't valuable. I think you can have multiple levels of outreach in multiple ways. I don't think just because someone has an LGBTQ outreach, they should not have an outreach maybe to women or to people of color. I think we should be doing all of that. And you'll find there's a lot more intersectionality there than people would, I guess, think, especially if you walk in the world as a person of color or a person of diversity. I don't have the luxury of being one or the other. I'm all things all the time. So I am open to all of that. And I think we should all start looking at it as additive and not a zero-sum game. The other piece, Dean, you were saying about images that we put out there. I had this conversation with someone offline, and I just thought this would be an appropriate time to share it. I'm not suggesting that you erase the history of our sport or any sport. I'm saying, yeah, I love seeing the old footage, and I love seeing the pictures and the history, like of the people curling on the lakes, with the old brooms and things. I think it's part of what makes the sport one of the coolest things out there. I think we have to be careful that those aren't the only images that we put out there of the sport. It's okay to evolve, and it's okay to acknowledge where you came from, as long as you spend equal time acknowledging where you're headed. I don't think that anybody that I know is suggesting that we stop showing those images. I feel like we just need to make sure that those shouldn't be the only images. Like if I scroll through a scrapbook and I don't ever see myself represented, that's one thing. It's one thing to say this is what it was 100 years ago, whatever, and this is where we are today. And look at how great that is. Look what that says to us as a community, that we've expanded, the people that are in our world and the people that are welcome here. That's kind of where I come from with all of this. And honestly, I don't have a choice, right? Like I was born the way I was born, and I have to figure out how to navigate the world. And I think that all of these conversations are valuable, but I always question people if they're coming through the door with critique and no solution. So if someone brings that up to me, I say, that's a great conversation. How would you solve that? What program do you want to see that you don't see? And what kind of work are you willing to do to bring that to life? How do you want to animate that vision? Talk to me about what you're willing to do as a practicing ally or as a person who's willing to get in the game and be a verb, and not just someone who has a lot of wonderful thoughts that just throws water on the good that other people are trying to do. And as you can tell, I have a very strong stance on that. So if anybody comes at you that way, send them to me and we'll have a good conversation about it. I have a lot of ideas.
And I will thank you, Deb, for your clarity on the answer about images, because yeah, we don't want to. This is not about erasing, anything. I mean, but we do have, have to be a little more aware, I guess. But in connected to that, Becky Horseman asked, "Is there new media available, like Learn to Curl training videos?" That would be more diversified, I guess, show more diversity in its presentation. I would say at USA Curling right now, we don't have a bunch of new content like that, but I would tell you that going forward, and this comes down from CEO Jeff Plush and our chair Courtney Schmidt, that yeah, we need to have those things. Do we have a great Learn to Curl video that features Deb right now, or these other people that we hope that, so Deb, because Deb doesn't want to be the sole ambassador. No, we don't have that, but we will in the future, as we produce more of that kind of content.
Yeah, my 15 minutes was up a long time ago, guys. I'm surprised you still want to hear from me. So
you're going to be tough to beat here, but yes, yeah. And Becky asked, especially media we can use on social media. Totally, yeah. We are, you can expect to see some banners and things that you can use that would from us. That's an easy one that show more diversity. If you're looking for a good example of a curling facility that does a nice job, first of all, with social media in general, but also reflecting that this is a sport for everyone, that Southern California Curling Center and Matt Gamboa do this pretty well, right? And in a way that I think, is really good and not patronizing, and it just feels like a natural part of what they're doing there. So I would encourage you to follow their Instagram and Twitter feeds to for a way they do that. I mean, so it's a good question, but yeah, I think look for some, we can supply Facebook banners and Instagram banners and things like that that would help there. So it's a good question, Becky, and I'm going to do more investigation on getting you some tools you can use.
And I think it's also important to note that we have to be thoughtful about that too. It's not that we don't want to do it, but we want to make sure that while it's important to send the right signals and set the right tone and have the right collateral, like I believe that is important because, you know, I know when I see the pride flag, I have an immediate, you know, vibe on what that place is trying, the message we're trying to send. So we do want to have those types of signals, but we also want to make sure that it goes deeper than just signaling on the outside. So, and not being accused of sort of tokenizing or I guess just doing sort of like the easy low hanging thing where we're just sort of, you know, saying what we're going to do and not actually activating underneath it. So I think we're being as deliberate as possible about what to put where and when to put it there so that we're making sure it's an accurate representation of the work we're actually trying to do on the ground. That's my take on it, Dean. That's how I feel. Like we've been putting a lot of thought into the types of things we want to put out there so that it doesn't just seem like an empty signal. Because, you
Yeah.
know, there are people who immediately want to like point out, you know, how what you're saying and what you're doing don't align. So we want to make sure that we're walking the walk and aligning accordingly.
Lauren asked, how will we access registration for the meetings on the 17th and 28th? We'll have information on the USA Curling website. The social media feeds will have it. And if you don't see it, please just email me and I'll make sure you have a link to the registration. So it'll be just probably like our, you know, Learn to Curls, the Learn to Curl instructor clinics we do. It'll be a WooFoo form. And so it'll be pretty straightforward.
Is it fair to say the same place they saw this announcement would be kind of a place where they would see?
Yeah, I'll certainly see news about the session. So we will endeavor to make sure that that information is spread widely. Well, right at 5, Deb, we've arrived right at 5. I'm going to ask anybody if they have a last question. And if not, like I said, we're always happy to take questions and listen. Again, I try to keep Deb to the important stuff, and I try to on this. And so contact me, and I'll make sure that we get things moving in the right direction. That usually involves talking to Deb about it. So
you can also follow me on Instagram at Curling Chicks, and it's CHIX, so at Curling Chicks. Anything like registration or these types of things, it's a boring Insta feed. It's not great, but I'll announce those types of things there too. So if you're on Insta, you'll see it whenever Dean and I do one of our things. We try to put it out there, and I think you're also there too, right, Dean?
Yeah, I'm not as active on Instagram, but I am at Dean Gemmell on Twitter, and I would certainly put it on my Twitter feed. This is our desperate attempt to gain followers here, Deb. But yeah, whatever we do, right? So yeah, follow Deb for sure.
I've had no content because there hasn't been much curling. It's all curling content.
Yeah, and Deb and I are also going to start our curling league shortly, so we can always rehash your questions or concerns after a victory or a defeat on Monday nights. So thank you, Deb. Thanks, everyone. I appreciate the time, as always, and we'll keep pushing forward with this. Like I said, it's not super easy work, but and we're gonna zig and zag as we get there, but and it's not gonna be perfect, but it will be good. All right. Thanks everyone. See you, Deb.
See you soon, Dean.